The great chamber of the Galactic Council floated in the darkness of space, orbiting the blue giant star known to its inhabitants as Arcturus Prime. For 10,000 years, this station had served as the seat of power for the 12 elder species who ruled the known galaxy. Today, like many days before, they gathered to discuss the fate of yet another primitive world. Ambassador Voreth, of the Kelthari Dominion, stood at the center of the chamber, his scaled body reflecting the soft light that filled the room. He was tall, nearly 8 feet, with 4 arms and eyes that could see in complete darkness. His people had conquered 60 worlds. They were the military arm of the council, and Voreth had personally overseen the absorption of a dozen species into their empire. "We have completed our observation of the species known as humans," Voreth announced, his voice carrying through the chamber. "Our scouts have watched them for 97 of their years. I am prepared to deliver my final assessment." High Counselor Marin sat upon her floating throne, her ancient body wrapped in ceremonial robes. She was of the Velith, a species that communicated through a combination of sound and color. Her skin shifted to a pale blue, indicating permission to continue. Voreth activated the holographic display at the center of the chamber. Images of Earth appeared, showing its cities, its people, its vehicles and aircraft. The council members watched with varying degrees of interest. "The humans are a young species," Voreth explained. "They achieved basic space travel only recently. They have established small colonies on their moon and the 4th planet in their system, which they call Mars. Their technology is primitive by our standards. Their fastest ships would take years to reach the nearest star." He changed the display to show human biology. A rotating image of a human body appeared with various organs and systems highlighted. Physically, they are remarkably fragile. They require constant intake of water and nutrients. They must sleep for approximately 1/3 of each day. Their bodies cannot survive in vacuum for more than a few moments. They have no natural armor, no regenerative abilities, no venomous glands. A fall from a modest height can kill them. Exposure to radiation, extreme temperatures, or even certain common chemicals can end their lives. Several council members made sounds of amusement. The Kelthari representative from the military command laughed openly. Furthermore, Voreth continued, "They are a divided species. They organize themselves into competing nations that frequently engage in warfare against each other. They fight over territory, resources, and ideological differences. They have weapons capable of destroying their own civilization, and they have come close to using them on multiple occasions." "And yet they survive?" "Barely," Voreth replied. "They are a species that seems determined to destroy itself. Our projections indicate they will likely cause their own extinction within the next few centuries. However, they do possess some value as laborers. Their hands are nimble, and they can be trained to perform complex tasks. Additionally, some of the elder species have expressed interest in them as a source of entertainment." The council chamber filled with murmurs of agreement. This was not unusual. Many primitive species had been absorbed into the Dominion as servants and performers. It was simply the natural order of things. The strong ruled, and the weak served. "My recommendation," Voreth concluded, "is that we proceed with standard integration. We will offer them a choice: voluntary submission to the Dominion, or forced compliance. Based on their fragile nature and internal divisions, I anticipate they will surrender without significant resistance. The operation should be complete within one of their lunar cycles." High Counselor Marin considered this for a long moment. Her skin cycled through several colors before settling on green, the sign of approval. "The Council accepts your recommendation. You may proceed, Ambassador." Voreth bowed deeply. "It will be done." Far across the galaxy, on a dusty red planet that humans had only recently learned to call home, Commander Jake Harris stood on the observation deck of the Mars Research Station. He was 42 years old, with graying hair and tired eyes that had seen too many reports and too few sunrises. He had been stationed on Mars for 3 years now, overseeing the defense installations that protected humanity's first major colony beyond Earth. The observation deck offered a view of the Martian landscape that never failed to move him. Red dust stretched to the horizon under a pink sky. In the distance, the lights of New Houston glittered in the early evening darkness. 20,000 humans called this place home. 20,000 pioneers building a future among the stars. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of running footsteps. Lieutenant Lisa Palmer burst through the door, her face flushed with excitement and fear. "Commander, you need to see this," she said, her breath coming in quick gasps. Harris turned to face her. "What is it?" "Our deep space sensors picked up something." "A vessel, sir. It just appeared at the edge of the solar system. Nothing in our database matches its signature." Harris felt his heart begin to beat faster. For decades, humanity had wondered if they were alone in the universe. They had sent signals into the void, hoping for a response. Now it seemed they had received one. "Show me," he said. They moved quickly to the command center, where a dozen technicians were already working at their stations. The main display showed a schematic of the solar system with a small red dot moving slowly inward from beyond the orbit of Neptune. "It's big," Palmer said. "Roughly twice the size of our largest carrier, and it's moving fast. Much faster than anything we can produce." Harris studied the display in silence. He had trained for many scenarios during his military career. Asteroid impacts, solar flares, colonial uprisings. But this was something entirely different. This was first contact. "Have we attempted communication?" he asked. "Yes, sir." "On all frequencies." "No response so far?" Harris nodded slowly. "Alert Earth Command. Tell them what we have found. And put all defense stations on standby." "Sir, do you really think that is necessary? This could be a peaceful first contact." Harris looked at her with eyes that had seen too much of human history. "Lieutenant, when strangers arrive unannounced, it is rarely to bring gifts. Prepare our people. Whatever comes next, we will face it together." As the unknown vessel continued its journey toward Earth, the humans went about their lives, unaware that a distant council had already decided their fate. They ate dinner with their families. They played with their children. They argued about politics and sports and the small concerns of daily existence. They did not know that they had been judged and found wanting. They did not know that an empire spanning thousands of worlds had looked upon them and seen only weakness. They did not know that the greatest test in their species' history was about to begin. But perhaps that was for the best. Because if the council had looked more closely, if they had studied not just human bodies but human hearts, they might have noticed something important. They might have seen that this fragile species had faced extinction many times before. Ice ages, plagues, wars that threatened to consume everything and every single time. Against all odds they had survived. The humans did not know what was coming. But when it arrived, they would be ready. Not because they were strong, not because they were fast, but because giving up was simply not in their nature. It never had been. The Kelthari. Warship entered Earth's atmosphere on a clear Tuesday morning. It descended through the clouds over the Pacific Ocean, its massive hull blocking out the sun for miles in every direction. The ship was called the Dominion's Fury, and it had conquered 11 worlds. Commander Drex stood on its bridge. Watching the blue planet grow larger in the viewing screen, Drex was a veteran of many campaigns. He had personally led the assault on the crystal cities of Varith 7. He had crushed the rebellion on Kelthari Minor. He had never known defeat, and he did not expect to know it today. These humans were soft creatures. Their world would fall like all the others. "Open a channel to all communication devices on the planet," Drex ordered. His communications officer obeyed. Within seconds, every television, every radio, every phone on Earth displayed the same image. A tall, scaled alien with 4 arms and cold black eyes, speaking in a voice that the ship's computers translated into every human language. "People of Earth, I am Commander Drex of the Kelthari Dominion, speaking on behalf of the Galactic Council. Your species has been observed and evaluated. The Council has determined that you will be integrated into the Dominion as a servant class. You have 1 rotation of your planet to surrender all military assets and government control to Dominion representatives. If you comply, your lives will be spared. If you resist, you will be destroyed. This is not a negotiation. This is your only warning." The transmission ended. Across the world, 8 billion humans stared at their screens in shock. Governments convened emergency meetings. Military forces went to high alert. Religious leaders called for calm. Panic spread through cities as people rushed to store food and supplies in a bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains in Colorado. General Ben Cooper watched the alien transmission with steady eyes. He was 63 years old, a man who had served his country for decades. He had fought in 3 wars, lost friends to bullets and bombs, and carried scars, both visible and hidden. Nothing in his long career had prepared him for this moment. But Ben Cooper was not a man who frightened easily. "Get me a channel to that ship," he said calmly. His staff looked at him with uncertainty. "Sir, what do you intend to say?" Cooper stood up from his chair. "I intend to give them our answer." Right. 10 minutes later, a transmission from Earth reached the Dominion's Fury. Commander Drex watched with amusement as an old human male appeared on his screen. "Commander Drex," the human said, "my name is General Ben Cooper. I speak on behalf of the United Earth Defense Coalition. We have received your message and discussed it among ourselves. After careful consideration, we must respectfully decline your offer." Drex's amusement turned to surprise, then anger. "You decline? You do not have that option, human." "Furthermore," Cooper continued, his voice never wavering, "if any hostile action is taken against Earth or its colonies, we will consider it an act of war. We are prepared to defend ourselves. However, we remain open to peaceful discussion. I am transmitting coordinates to a neutral location in the Pacific Ocean where we can meet and negotiate like civilized beings." The transmission ended. Drex stared at the blank screen for a long moment. Then he began to laugh. The sound echoed through the bridge, cold and harsh. "These creatures are even more foolish than the reports suggested," he said. "Helm, set course for the nearest major population center. We will demonstrate the consequences of defiance." The Dominion's Fury changed course and headed toward Australia. Within the hour, it hovered over Sydney Harbor, shadow falling across the famous Opera House and the bridges and the millions of people who called this city home. Drex activated the external speakers. "People of Sydney, your leaders have chosen to resist. You will now witness the price of that choice. Prepare to receive our ground forces." What Drex did not know was that General Cooper had anticipated this move. For 3 hours, while the alien commander had been gloating, Earth's forces had been preparing. Submarines had silently repositioned in waters around the globe. Satellites had been moved into new orbits. Missile batteries, hidden beneath mountains and deserts, had powered up their systems. Humanity had spent its entire existence fighting itself. They had developed weapons of terrible power, weapons designed to destroy each other. Now, for the first time, those weapons would be turned against a common enemy. The attack came without warning. 7 submarines in the Pacific launched electromagnetic pulse missiles that struck the Dominion's Fury simultaneously. The ship's shields, designed to deflect energy weapons and kinetic projectiles, had never encountered this type of attack. The pulses overloaded critical systems, causing the shields to flicker and fail. Before Drex could issue orders, a second wave struck. Conventional missiles from launch sites in Australia, Japan, and the western coast of North America converged on the suddenly vulnerable warship. Explosions tore through the hull. Fire spread through the lower decks. The great ship that had conquered 11 worlds began to fall from the sky. Drex barely managed to reach and escape. Pod before the Dominion's Fury crashed into the Pacific Ocean. The impact sent a wave across the harbor, but the ship sank quickly. Disappearing beneath the dark waters, human naval vessels converged on the crash site within hours. Rescue teams recovered Drex and 18 surviving crew members from their escape pods. The alien commander was injured, his scales cracked and bleeding. But he was alive. He was brought to a naval ship and placed in a medical bay. Human doctors treated his wounds with careful, professional attention. When he was stable, General Cooper arrived via helicopter. Drex looked up at the old human who entered his room. The creature was small and fragile, with thin skin and weak eyes. Yet there was something in his posture, something in the way he carried himself, that Drex had not expected. Cooper pulled a chair next to the bed and sat down. He offered Drex a glass of water. "Medical staff says you will recover fully," Cooper said. "I am glad. I would rather talk than fight." Drex stared at him. "How your species is primitive? Our technology is centuries beyond yours." Cooper smiled slightly. "Commander, your technology may be advanced, but you made a simple mistake. You assumed that because our bodies are weak, our spirits are weak as well. You looked at us and saw prey. You should have looked more carefully." "What happens now?" Drex asked. "That depends on your counsel. You can accept that we are not servants to be conquered. You can negotiate with us as equals, or you can send more ships and we will destroy them too. You cannot defeat the Dominion. We have thousands of warships, millions of soldiers." Cooper nodded. "Perhaps, but we have 8 billion people who will never surrender. Every city will fight. Every town will resist. Every man, woman, and child will become a soldier if necessary. How many of your people are you willing to sacrifice to conquer a world that will never stop fighting?" Drex had no answer. In all his years of conquest, he had never encountered a species like this. Other worlds had surrendered when they saw the Dominion's power. Others had fought briefly before accepting defeat. But these humans spoke of endless resistance with the calm certainty of people who meant every word. Cooper stood up. "I will leave you to rest. A medical team will continue to care for you. When you are recovered, we will arrange transport to return you to your people. You can deliver a message for us." "What message?" Cooper walked to the door and paused. "Tell them we are not afraid. Tell them we have been fighting since we learned to stand upright. Tell them that if they come for us, we will show them what that means." He left without another word. Drex lay in the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. The Council had promised an easy conquest. They had described humans as weak and divided and primitive. They had been wrong. They had been terribly, catastrophically wrong. And Drex suspected that the galaxy was about to learn just how wrong they had been. The news of the Dominions. Fury reached the Galactic Council within days. High Counselor Marin listened to the report with growing disbelief. Her skin cycled through colors of shock, anger, and finally a deep crimson that her species reserved for moments of true crisis. "One ship," she said. "They destroyed one of our warships with primitive projectiles and electromagnetic pulses." Ambassador Voroth stood before her, his scales pale with shame. "High Counselor, this was an unexpected development. The humans demonstrated tactical creativity that our models did not predict. However, this changes nothing. They won a single battle through surprise. They cannot win a war, and give them a war," Marin commanded. "Assemble a proper invasion fleet. I want this planet conquered and these creatures broken. The galaxy is watching. If we show weakness now, every subjugated world will begin to question our authority." Voroth bowed. "It will be done." Within 2 months, the largest military force in Kelthari history assembled at the edge of human space. 40 warships. Each one larger and more powerful than the Dominion's Fury. Transport vessels carrying 400,000 ground troops. Support ships loaded with supplies and weapons. It was a force that had crushed entire civilizations. Admiral Voroth himself commanded the fleet from the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Victory. He had studied every piece of information available about the human defense of Earth. He would not make the same mistakes as Commander Drex. On Earth, humanity prepared for the coming storm. The United Earth Defense Coalition had expanded rapidly, with every nation contributing whatever resources they could spare. Factories that once made cars now produced tanks and aircraft. Scientists who once studied stars now designed weapons. Civilians trained in basic combat and first aid. Commander Jake Harris, promoted to Admiral after his early warning had helped save Earth, worked alongside Fleet Admiral Kate Morrison at the new Unified Command Center in Geneva. Morrison was a tall woman in her 50s, with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too many friends die in the conflicts of the previous century. "We have 15 combat-capable vessels," Morrison said, studying the holographic display of the solar system. "They have 40 warships and enough troops to occupy every major city on Earth 3 times over." Harris nodded. "The odds are not in our favor. They never are." Morrison turned to face him. "But we have something they do not expect. We have been fighting wars since before we discovered fire. Every generation of humans has faced enemies that seemed unbeatable, and we are still here." The Kelthari fleet arrived in the solar system on a cold December morning. Admiral Voroth broadcast no ultimatums this time. He simply ordered his ships to advance and his troops to prepare for deployment. The battle of the solar system began at the orbit of Neptune, where human forces had positioned their first line of defense. 3 human destroyers faced the entire Kelthari fleet. They lasted 47 minutes, but in that time they managed to destroy 2 enemy warships and damage 3 others. Captain Nick Taylor commanded one of those destroyers. The Spirit of Chicago. When his ship lost propulsion and weapons, he ordered his crew to abandon ship. Then he locked the helm, aimed his dying vessel at the nearest Kelthari transport, and stayed at his post until impact. The transport was destroyed. 8,000 Kelthari soldiers died. Nick Taylor's name became the first of many that humanity would remember. The fleet pushed inward. At Jupiter, human forces had established a network of weapon platforms hidden among the planet's many moons. The Kelthari expected these defenses and moved to destroy them. What they did not expect was that the platforms were designed to explode, creating a field of debris and radiation that disabled 6 more warships. Mars fell after 3 weeks of brutal fighting. The colonists refused to surrender. They fought in the canyons and tunnels, using the planet's geography against an enemy that had never encountered such terrain. 20,000 civilians died, but they took 30,000 Kelthari soldiers with them. Admiral Morrison watched the reports come in from her command center, her face a mask of controlled grief. Every loss was a name she would carry for the rest of her life. Every fallen city was a wound that would never fully heal, but she did not waver. She could not afford to. "The enemy fleet will reach Earth orbit in 6 days, Harris reported. "What are your orders?" Morrison was silent for a long moment. Then she spoke. "We make them pay for every inch. We fight in orbit. We fight in the atmosphere. We fight in the streets if we have to. And when they think they have one, we fight some more." The Battle of Earth lasted for months. It was the bloodiest conflict in human history. Cities burned. Landmarks that had stood for centuries were reduced to rubble. The death toll climbed into the millions, then tens of millions. But the Kelthari paid a terrible price for their conquest. Human fighters employed tactics that no species had ever used against them. Pilots flew suicide missions into enemy ships. Ground forces staged ambushes in sewers and subway tunnels. Civilians formed resistance cells that struck at supply lines and communication centers on the moon. A force of miners and scientists held off a Kelthari landing party for 11 days. They used drilling equipment as weapons and explosive charges meant for excavation as bombs. When the base finally fell, only 17 humans remained alive. They had killed over 1,000 enemy soldiers. Admiral Voroth watched his forces bleed and wondered how this was possible. The humans had inferior technology. They were outnumbered 10 to 1. By every calculation, they should have surrendered weeks ago. Instead, they fought harder than any species he had ever encountered. His aide approached with the latest casualty reports. For every human killed, 3 Kelthari soldiers had fallen. The invasion force that had seemed overwhelming was now dangerously depleted. "Admiral," the aide said hesitantly, "our ground commanders are requesting additional troops. They say the humans are not behaving like any conquered population they have seen. Even in occupied territories, resistance continues." Voroth closed his eyes. He thought of Commander Drex's warning, delivered from a human hospital bed. "Tell them we have been fighting since we learned to stand upright." The invasion stalled at the orbit of Jupiter. Kelthari supply lines were stretched thin, harassed constantly by human raiding parties. Morale among the troops was collapsing. Soldiers who had eagerly volunteered for what they thought would be an easy campaign now spoke of the human world with fear in their voices. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the carrier Independence. Watching the remaining Kelthari ships pull back to regroup, beside her, Harris reviewed the damage reports. Their losses were catastrophic. Nearly half of humanity's fleet was destroyed. Millions were dead. But they had survived. They're retreating, Harris said. Morrison nodded slowly. For now. They will return with more ships, more soldiers, and we will fight them again. Morrison turned to face him. Yes, we will. But this time, we will not wait for them to come to us. She activated the fleet-wide communication channel. All ships. This is Fleet Admiral Morrison. The enemy is withdrawing. Our losses have been severe, and I mourn every soul we have lost. But we have proven something today. We have proven that humanity will not be conquered. We have shown the galaxy that we will fight for our freedom with our last breath. She paused, letting her words settle over the exhausted crews of her remaining vessels. Now we take the fight to them. Prepare for offensive operations. We are going hunting. Across the battered fleet, tired men and women straightened their shoulders. They had lost friends, family, entire cities. They had every reason to despair, but despair was not in their nature. They had survived. And now they would make their enemies regret ever finding their small blue world. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. For 1,000 years, the Kelthari Dominion had conquered and expanded. Species that dared to resist were crushed within months. The natural order was simple. The strong ruled, and the weak submitted. But the humans refused to follow this order. Within 18 months of the Battle of Earth, human forces had pushed beyond their solar system. They captured Kelthari ships and studied their technology, adapting it with remarkable speed. They built new vessels in orbital shipyards that worked around the clock. They trained new soldiers to replace those who had fallen, and then they began to liberate worlds that the Dominion had conquered. Centuries ago, the first was Varith Prime, a planet of crystalline beings who had lived under Kelthari rule for 300 years. When human ships appeared in their sky, the Varazzi thought it was another Dominion patrol. They had long ago given up hope of freedom. Captain Danny Morgan led the ground team that made first contact. He was 34 years old, a former construction worker from Ohio, who had enlisted the day after the alien transmission. He had survived Mars. He had fought in the tunnels of New Houston. He had watched friends die in battles that should have been impossible to win. Now he stood before the leader of the Varazzi, a being made of living crystal that reflected light and patterns that served as their form of communication. "We are humans," Morgan said through the translation device his team carried. "We have come to remove the Dominion presence from your world. After that, you will be free to govern yourselves. We ask nothing in return, except friendship." The Varazzi leader's crystals flickered with colors that the device translated as confusion, then disbelief, then something that might have been hope. "Why would you do this? The Dominion is powerful. You are few." Morgan smiled. "Because someone has to. And because we know what it is like to face conquest. No species should be forced to live under the rule of another." The liberation of Varith Prime took 3 weeks. Kelthari forces there were small, mostly administrators and a token military presence. When word spread of what had happened, other conquered worlds began to whisper. The humans were coming. The humans were freeing people. The Council watched these developments with growing alarm. High Counselor Marin convened emergency sessions daily, demanding explanations, solutions, strategies. But the Kelthari military had no answers. Their fleet was rebuilding, but it would take years to replace the losses from the Earth's campaign. In the meantime, the humans continued their advance. Captain Morgan became something of a legend among the liberated worlds. His team of 40 soldiers captured the Kelthari supply station at Vega, a critical point in the Dominion's logistics network. They held it against 300 enemy soldiers for 9 hours until reinforcements arrived. When a reporter asked him how they had managed such an impossible feat, Morgan shrugged. "We did not have the option of losing, so we found a way to win." His words were transmitted across the galaxy. Other conquered species heard them and began to believe that resistance might be possible after all. The Talari were the next to rise up. They were a peaceful species, herbivores with no natural weapons, who had served as agricultural laborers for the Dominion for 5 centuries. They had never fought back because they believed they could not. But when human forces arrived in their system, something changed. Talari workers refused to harvest crops. They sabotaged transportation networks. They hid human scouts and fed them intelligence about Dominion troop movements. The rebellion spread like fire. World after world, species after species began to resist. The Dominion found itself fighting not just humans but a growing alliance of formerly conquered peoples. Admiral Morrison established a forward command post on a liberated moon near Kelthari space. She coordinated operations across dozens of systems, managing a war that grew larger every day. Her hair had turned completely white over the past year. Her eyes carried shadows that spoke of losses too numerous to count, but her voice remained steady, her decisions clear. "We cannot win through force alone," she told her commanders during a strategy meeting. "The Dominion still has more ships, more soldiers, more resources. But we can win by showing the galaxy that they are not invincible. Every world we free is a world that joins our cause. Every battle we survive proves that resistance is possible." The Kelthari scientist Priax had spent months studying captured humans. He was not a soldier. He was a researcher, assigned to understand how this primitive species had managed to defy all predictions. His findings would eventually be presented to the Council, but first he had to make sense of them himself. He sat in his laboratory, surrounded by data and biological samples, and recorded interviews with human prisoners. The prisoners had been surprisingly cooperative, answering his questions with a directness that puzzled him. They did not seem to hate him, despite being his enemies. They simply wanted him to understand, and slowly, terribly, he was beginning to. "They are not weak," he dictated into his recording device. "We measured their bodies and found fragility. We measured their technology and found primitiveness. We measured their society and found division. But we failed to measure the one thing that matters most." He paused, struggling to find words for concepts his species had never needed to describe. "Humans are impossibly strong, not in their muscles or their weapons, but in their minds. They experience pain and continue fighting. They suffer loss and continue advancing. They face certain death and refuse to accept it." Priax called up an image of a human soldier who had been captured during the Battle of Earth. The soldier had been injured, missing an arm, yet he had continued to fight until overwhelming force brought him down. When asked why, he had simply said that his friends were still fighting. He could not abandon them. "They form bonds with each other that we do not fully understand," Priax continued. "When one of them falls, the others do not retreat. They fight harder. It is as if each death strengthens their resolve rather than weakening it. This is not logical. This should not be possible. But it is." He thought of the reports from occupied territories where human resistance cells continued to operate despite constant Dominion patrols. Humans would hide in ruins, surviving on scraps, launching attacks against forces that outnumbered them 100-1. They should have surrendered. They should have accepted the inevitable, but they did not accept. They never accepted. That was the key. "Their greatest weapon is not their ships or their bombs," Priax said. "It is their refusal to give up. They do not believe in inevitable defeat. They believe that as long as one human still breathes, victory remains possible. And because they believe it, they make it true." He ended the recording and sat in silence for a long time. Then he began to prepare his report for the Council. He knew they would not want to hear what he had to say. They would not want to believe that their greatest military power had been brought low by creatures it dismissed as weak and primitive, but the truth did not care what they wanted to believe. The truth was that the humans were winning, not because they were stronger or smarter or more numerous, but because they simply refused to lose. And Priax suspected that this was a war the Dominion could not win. Because you could kill humans. You could destroy their cities and burn their worlds, but you could not break their will. And as long as that will remained intact, they would never stop fighting. Never. The war lasted 3 years, 4 months, and 17 days. Historians would later argue about when exactly it ended, but most agreed that the true conclusion came not with a final battle, but with a quiet message sent across secured channels. High Counselor Marin requested a meeting. She was the last surviving member of the original council that had ordered the conquest of Earth. The others had fallen to various fates: assassination by their own people, death in battles gone wrong, or simply the weight of years catching up to them during a time of unprecedented stress. Marin had endured because she was the oldest and, some said, the wisest. Now she sat alone in a small chamber on a neutral station at the edge of explored space. The great floating throne she had once occupied was gone. Her ceremonial robes had been replaced by simple clothing. Her skin, which had once shifted through confident colors, now remained a steady gray that indicated exhaustion and resignation. The door opened, and the human delegation entered. Admiral Kate Morrison led the group. The years of war had left their mark on her. She walked with a slight limp from an injury that had never fully healed. Her face was lined with wrinkles that had not been there when the war began. But her eyes remained sharp, and her presence filled the room in a way that Marin had learned to recognize. This was a woman who had faced the worst the galaxy could offer and emerged unbroken. Behind Morrison came General Ben Cooper, the man who had delivered humanity's first defiant response to Commander Drex's ultimatum. He was old now, his hair completely white, his movements slow and careful, but he had insisted on being present for this moment. He had seen the beginning. He wanted to see the end. The third member of the delegation was a young woman named Amy Chen. She was a diplomat, one of a new generation that had grown up during the war. She carried documents and translation devices, but her primary role was to represent the future that humanity hoped to build. Marin studied them as they took their seats across from her. 3 humans, such small, fragile creatures, such impossible, unbreakable creatures. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," she said, her voice transmitted through translation devices. "I must ask a question before we proceed. It is a question that has haunted me since this war began." Morrison nodded. "Ask how." Marin's skin flickered with colors that the devices struggled to interpret. "How did you do it? Your species is young. Your technology was primitive. Your bodies are weak by any standard measure. We had conquered hundreds of worlds. We had armies that numbered in the billions. How did you defeat us?" The humans exchanged glances. It was General Cooper who answered. He leaned forward in his chair, his old joints creaking with the effort. "High Counselor, you made a mistake at the very beginning. You looked at us and saw our limitations. You saw that we need water and food and sleep. You saw that our lives are short and our bodies break easily. You saw a weak species, and you decided we would be easy to conquer." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "But you did not see our history. You did not see the ice ages we survived huddling in caves while glaciers covered the world. You did not see the plagues that killed millions, yet left survivors who rebuilt civilization from the ashes. You did not see the wars we fought against each other, terrible wars that should have destroyed us, yet somehow made us stronger." Cooper's voice grew stronger as he spoke, carrying the weight of everything his species had endured. "We are not strong because our bodies are powerful. We are strong because we refuse to give up. Every time the universe tried to kill us, we found a way to survive. Every time we faced an enemy that should have destroyed us, we fought until we won or died trying. That is who we are. That is what you did not understand." Marin was silent for a long moment. Her skin shifted to a deep blue that indicated sorrow. "We called you weak," she said. "We were fools. You judged us by the wrong measure," Morrison said, her voice softer than Cooper's. "You measured strength in claws and armor and venom. You did not measure it in determination and adaptability, in the bonds we form with each other. A human will die for their friends without hesitation. A human will fight impossible odds because surrender is simply not something we consider. What happens now? Marin asked. You have one. You could destroy what remains of the Dominion. You could conquer our worlds as we tried to conquer yours. Amy Chen spoke for the first time. Her voice was young and clear, carrying none of the weariness that marked the older humans. We have no interest in conquest, she said. We did not fight this war to build an empire. We fought to be free and to free others who suffered under your rule. We want peace. We want trade. We want cooperation. The galaxy is vast, and there is room for all of us to thrive. Marin's skin flickered with surprise. You would show mercy? After everything we did to you? Morrison nodded. Mercy is not weakness, High Counselor. It is strength. It takes more courage to offer peace than to seek revenge. We have learned this lesson many times throughout our history, often at great cost. The treaty was signed that day. It established humanity as an equal partner in galactic affairs. It freed all worlds that had been conquered by the Dominion. It created a new alliance, with Earth at its center, that would work to prevent future wars of conquest. As the delegation prepared to leave, Moran called out one final time. Admiral Morrison, I must know, do you hate us? After everything we did, all the death and destruction, do your people hate the Kelthari? Morrison turned to face her. For a moment, something passed across her face, a shadow of grief and anger and exhaustion. Then it faded, replaced by something that might have been compassion. We do not hate you, she said. Hatred takes energy that we would rather spend on building a better future. Your people made a terrible choice, and we all paid the price for it. But the war is over now. We can either remain enemies forever, or we can learn from what happened and try to do better. She paused at the door. We choose to do better. We hope you will make the same choice. Then she was gone, leaving Marin alone with her thoughts in the years that followed. The galaxy changed in ways that no one had predicted. Humans spread across the stars, not as conquerors, but as traders, explorers, and diplomats. The species they had freed became their allies and friends. Even the Kelthari, slowly and cautiously, began to rebuild their relationship with the people they had once tried to enslave. Young Kelthari students learned about the great humiliation in their history classes. They studied the tactical mistakes, the strategic failures, the arrogance that had led to disaster. But the most important lesson was always saved for last. Never assume that. Fragility of body means fragility of spirit. The humans had taught the galaxy this truth. They had written it in blood and fire and sacrifice. They had proved that the most dangerous creature,